What's up, everyone? This is Marcus of Cradle, and I've spent the last 6 months every Friday giving mix feedback on live stream viewers' mixes and masters. Over that period of time, it's over 150 songs at this point that I've listened to and given this feedback on. I've started noticing some patterns on some of the more common mistakes that I feel are holding those mixes back. So in this video, we're going to walk through those, walk through why they're issues and why they are holding your mixes and masters back from being the best they possibly can be. So the first thing is around vocals. And if your song has lyrics in it, has vocals in it, vocals are going to be the most important thing. They're going to be the center of attention, the center of your mix, and they really need to shine. So the most common thing that I'm seeing here is a tendency to make the vocal super crispy at the cost of making it really thin and losing any of its punch. So to talk through what I mean there, if we're looking at an isolated vocal in this case, let's just hear this in the mix here.
Look back, too fast running. So get in the car, get in the car, get in the car. Why so antsy? Raise me, honey. Late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your cards.
And then let's go ahead and listen to it with some of the EQ treatment just on top of it that I see in those songs that I'm listening to. So here, my default vocals here.
Raise me, honey. Late fees, lazy
and the
money.
first tendency that I see is this tendency to boost that upper end too much. I think there are maybe some free plugins or just, adding breath to the vocal. And I think it's easy to overdo that, especially when you first start using those effects, because it sounds good at first. And especially when you're soloing a vocal, let's take a listen to this, like as it's going.
Raise me, honey. Late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your cards, show me your cards, show me your cards, fold.
It's kind of addicting to add that little bit of sizzle on top of your vocal just by boosting that range a bunch. So that's the first thing I'm hearing. And while on its own, it sounds fine. Whenever you're mixing anything, it should be in the context of the mix. So when I'm hearing this in the context of the mix, we've got something more like,
antsy, raise me, honey. Late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your cards, show me your cards, show me your...
it just sounds too crispy. I don't know how else to put it. It sounds too crispy on that top end. And that's compounded by this next problem that I'm seeing in vocals too. So while that's going on, I'll mute that for a second. The other thing that is really common is cutting the lows of the vocal way too high. So again, let's hear this here soloed.
Get in the car, why so antsy? Raise me, honey. Late fees,
I'm hearing
money.
vocals that are cut between more than 250 hertz up. And when you're hearing this, again, like it can be kind of addicting at first, especially if you're listening soloed.
Get in the car, why so antsy? Raise me, honey. Late fees, lazy money. Well, show me
if there's any little bit of muddiness or low end, it's easy to think that that's improving the mix, but it's also, again, when you're listening in context of the mix, what is that low end of the vocal doing for the context of the mix? And then two, the fundamental frequency of a vocal, so I had Googled this before making the video, is somewhere between 100 hertz and 300 hertz, depending on the voice type. And if you cut all of that out, you're losing the essence of the vocal, the essence of the punch of that vocal. It becomes equivalent to listening to a voice over a telephone at that point. And so when you're doing that, like I said, it can be easy to think that when you're initially mixing that.
Raise me, honey. Late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your cards.
When you're just soloing it, but when you go back into the context of the mix.
Get in the car, get in the car. Why so antsy? Raise me, honey. Late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your cards, show me your cards, show me your cards.
You start to lose some of that focus of the vocal in the low end, some of that drive in it, and it becomes a thin vocal at that point where it doesn't really have that punch that you want it to have. It doesn't have that impact that you want it to have, especially since it's supposed to be the center of your mix. Combine that with the problem we looked at earlier. So again, let's bring that up to like 250 where I'm seeing some of those problem areas in the mixes. Turn that back on.
And see, raise me honey, late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your cards, show me your cards.
Then this is a pretty common sort of feel that I'm hearing in vocals across these songs pretty regularly, is too high of a boosted top end, too much lows cut out, and it gives you this thin, crispy vocal that just doesn't have the punch or the feeling that a vocal should have. Compare that here to the original.
Honey, late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your card. Why so antsy? Raise me honey, late fees,
If I were making this
lazy
again,
money.
sure, maybe I roll
Well, show me
off
your
some of
cards,
those.
show me your cards, show me your cards.
But I don't want to cut out those lower frequencies, especially since a good portion of my voice lies in those frequencies. And so getting rid of those is taking away some of the essence of what makes that vocal sound like that vocal. And so just to finish up that thought, again, cutting some of the rumble, cutting the lows, the rumble that's below the human voice, absolutely. Rolling off some of those lows or finding specific areas where it's really muddy or, maybe they were a little too close to the mic or there's room noise and starting to dip some of those, definitely. Those are all things that you can do without killing the vocal. But once you start just high passing a vocal up in that 200 to 300 range, you're at risk of losing a lot of material that you want to keep around. The next really common issue that I've been seeing with these mixes is the stereo image, or I should say the artificial stereo image that is being applied to these mixes and masters. So what I mean when I say stereo image is just the kind of spread or landscape of sounds across your stereo image. So left, center, right, where sounds are in that space and how you're getting the sounds in those space. So a traditional easy way to do that is if you have a mono recording of a guitar, you can pan it left or pan it right, and you're increasing your stereo image, or you're spreading the sounds across that stereo image by having, the guitar over on the left. Maybe you have your hi-hat over on the right, or you have a synth over on the right. Those sort of decisions, panning instruments one side or the other, is what can give you that wider stereo image. You can also start to do things like add a chorus effect or a microphaser effect, some sort of modulator effect that affects the audio in a way where it is spreading a mono signal across the stereo spectrum artificially. So, for example, for like a tremolo effect, it just waves that signal back and forth, left and right, at whatever speed you set the tremolo to. For other things, it's a little more complex, and I don't understand how they work, but it can start to introduce some weird artifacts and just sounding weird about it. So, for example, if you use Ozone Imager, great stereo imaging plugin, it's pretty easy to just turn the knob and increase the width of your audio that you're running through it, or you can turn on the stereoizer effect and start to affect it that way. So where that becomes an issue is if you're using it without really kind of thinking of the consequences, and maybe you're just looking at the visual of the stereo image and trying to base things off of that. However, there are several problems with that. So if I just go ahead and slap the Ozone Imager 2 plugin here on my master chain, let's go ahead, take a listen to that here. And start to slowly increase that here.
Hey, honey, hands, are you feeling lucky? Good and full of guts and glory. Trying to kill the king of hearts, put a jack in his blood.
And it just starts to sound weird. Like, I don't know how else to put it. It sounds, maybe it's phasey. I don't know the correct descriptor there, but it starts to lose its focus because there's nothing in the center of your stereo image now to draw your attention there. And so instead of hearing the mix and saying, oh, here's the center, here's the focus, here's the vocal that I should be paying attention to, when you just slap a stereo imager on a master bus like that, then everything gets spread out, and now nothing is in the center as the focus. It's all sort of spread out over this more evenly over this stereo image, and your ears, my ears, most people's ears don't know what to focus on at that point, and it just sounds like an overall less impactful mix, because having something in the center, deciding what should be the focus, is going to tell the listener what they should be focusing on, what they should be listening to. And things like kicks, basses, those things that really add punch to a mix, when you start to spread those out, not only does it just kind of sound weird and phasey like that, but it can start to lose its punch as well.
Hey, honey, hands, are you feeling lucky? Gunning for the guts and glory. Trying to kill the king of hearts, put a jacket in his...
So again, is there a place to use stereo imaging? Absolutely. I use it a little bit on some of my overheads for drums. I use it on synths. On the synth bus, if I have a lot of synths spread, I like to sometimes just spread them a little bit more. Same thing for background vocals. And as long as you're using it where it makes sense and it's tasteful, and you don't notice some of those artifacts that I was just describing there and isolating by just slapping it on the master chain like that, there's absolutely times where you can use that and have it be really advantageous to your mix. However, it's one of the more common things that I've seen across these 150 plus songs is just this weird sense of stereo imaging by applying way too much of it on the mastering chain itself. The last common problem that I've seen across a bunch of these songs is just absolutely smashing a master. So what I mean by that is losing the dynamics of the master and the sheer loudness of it. I phrase it as losing the dynamics of the master because everybody likes loud things, and louder is always better. So if you just listen to a song and you turn it up, it's likely going to sound better because you just innately like louder things. You know, at the extreme, if you go to a concert, it's more of an experience because you can literally feel the music as those sound waves are hitting you from the subs or whatever speakers they're blasting into the crowd. So loudness is not a problem in itself. However, in the mastering process, when you are just boosting up the master and obliterating it here, we saw in that last clip, -2 dB short-term loudness, I can't think of a scenario or a song where I would master something that loud. And the reason is, when you're mastering something that loud, when you're limiting it that hard, everything in the song becomes loud. You know, every single part of the song is loud, and everything is hitting the limiter. Every peak in the song is hitting the limiter at that point. And the problem comes in where, you know, when the chorus hits or when the hook hits, when the drop hits, whatever genre you're working with, if that doesn't feel louder than the non-drop parts, than the parts that are supposed to feel less energetic, then if there's not that jump in volume and that jump in just perceived loudness, then you're losing an opportunity to take the listener and give them more energy when that part hits. Another way to put it is that the master has lost its dynamics, reducing the difference between your peak loudness and your average loudness. So as an example, so that we can really hear this in action, let's hear going from a bridge to a chorus on this part, where in the first example, we'll have it limited really hard, and there's going to be very little difference in loudness level between that softer bridge and the chorus when it kicks in. And then we'll show the version where it's not limited as hard and we allow it to jump in volume. So let's go ahead and compare those here. And I do have this volume match mode on here from the FabFilter Pro L2, so we can more accurately compare between the different versions here.
NC, raise me, honey. Late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your cards, show me your cards, show me your cards. Fold. Hey, honey, hands, are you feeling lucky? Gunning for
Now let's go ahead and compare that here to the other version where we're not limiting it as hard.
And see, raise me honey, late fees, lazy money. Well, show me your cards, show me your cards, show me your cards. Fold. Hey, honey, hands, are you feeling lucky? Gunning for the guts and glory. Trying to give me your heart, but
So a much more dynamic master on that second example, and hopefully you could feel that jump in energy when compared to the first one, where it was really relatively static overall volume between that softer part and the chorus when it drops in. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button and move a little bit over, hit that subscribe button too, and let me know in the comments what you think are the most common mix mistakes as people are learning, or mistakes that you've made while you're learning. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.